channel. You are watching Shelly Flowers Reads and Writes, where I talk about all things related to reading and writing. I am your host, Michelle Flores, and today I am serving you goth chonga looks. I am serving you Halloween Calabaza Queen, so let's get with it. Today I am doing my September wrap-up. Let me tell y'all, I am not super proud of this month, but I did read 3 books and they were all very prosy, so there's that. I've also been teaching officially full-time. I just finished up my first full month of school, so I'm gonna cut myself a little bit of slack here. The first book that I finished this month was an audiobook, and this book was titled Welcome to the Goddamn Ice Cube by Blair Braverman. I believe I rated this book 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. I was actually very surprised at how much I enjoyed it. Essentially, this is a memoir that follows the story of Blair Braverman, who is a traveler and has spent most of her life living in like the Arctic North, bitter cold kind of situations. Could not be me. That is not the life I want to live. If I go to the north, it's because I'm going to be wrapped in some kind of warm goose blanket or something and sitting by a fire drinking hot chocolate because I am not built for the cold. But it was really fascinating to hear her story of being 16 and just going straight to Norway for one of her first big trips into the Arctic. And she went to this school where she learned how to work with mushing dogs and learned how to run a farm, and it was just so different than anything I've ever read before in my entire life. The other piece to this book that I do want to clarify now, because I think if you are going to eventually read it, you should know, she describes so many of her experiences with sexual assault, and it is brutal, and just so many of the things that she experienced because she was so young when she was traveling. She didn't even fully understand what was happening to her until she was able to get into relationships with men who actually treated her with bodily autonomy and respect, and it was such an eye-opener for me. I myself have not experienced sexual assault to that degree. I think, you know, as a woman, as a woman existing in this world, I have had my fair share of experiences like that, but not to the degree that she describes in the book, and it was so powerful. So I definitely recommend this book. I think especially if you are wanting to travel, there's so many incredible descriptions of very beautiful landscapes. So just for that reason alone, it's a great book. And then if you also want to get the added perspective of someone who has survived sexual assault, that is also a really interesting perspective to hear about within the book. The next book that I finished in the month of September is A Song Below Water by Bethany C. Morrow. So I have mixed feelings about this book. I rated it 3 stars. If I did half points, it would probably be like a 2.5. I love the concept of this book. I think this idea of comparing fantasy creatures to social justice movements within our society makes complete sense to me. I think we see it in comic books all the time, so to put it in a book format does not bother me. And I love anything that has to do with sirens, mermaids, all that good stuff. However, I think for me, the issue was more structure than idea in this book. There were 2 narrators, but I think their perspectives were just so similar. Not even their perspectives, their voices, that I do wonder what the benefit of having those 2 narrators was. And in this case, I wonder, could this book have benefited from having that third-person omniscient perspective where we get to see a little bit of all the characters within the story, or maybe like a third-person limited that kind of changes according to chapter. That's really where my head is at, because I just felt like there were so many things that was happening and I couldn't fully connect the dots because of the perspective shifts, and I would be reading a chapter and forget which character I was reading from. That could also just be a me thing. You know, this was a very stressful month, and so maybe I just lost focus while I was reading. That's entirely possible. And so because of that, I just feel like all of the parts did not fully come together. Part of me is also wondering if maybe I'm officially getting too old to read YA, because I felt the same way about Felix Ever After, and it's like, I like all of these ideas, I like the concepts that are being introduced, and I actually really like the characters individually, but when we try to put it all together, it just doesn't fully work for me. So I think if fantasy, urban fantasy with like a social justice twist is your thing, highly recommend this book. But if you are not someone who's into dual perspective novels, you might want to sit this one out. All right, the last book that I read this month was Kindred by Octavia E. Butler. This book I read for the Octavia E. Butler Slow Read that's being hosted by Onyx Pages and a few other people. I loved this book. I rated it 5 stars. I had never read anything by Octavia E. Butler before, maybe some of her short stories, but that's about it. This book just reminded me what good science fiction does. So much of early science fiction was about questioning the society that we live in, questioning power dynamics, examining, you know, when you throw in these complex moments within a story, what happens, you know, when you make those issues come up through the use of various plot points or anything like that. And it's just done so well. So this story follows Dana, who is a Black woman living in the 1970s. She's in her mid-20s, and out of nowhere, she's transported to the Antebellum South. She ends up going to her ancestors' plantation, and she meets her ancestors, one of whom happens to be the white male son of the plantation owner. And she is constantly called back to his time period, and throughout the book we just see what occurs because of that. It is mind-blowing, and I feel like the movie that just came out recently, Antebellum, probably borrowed a lot from this concept. I highly recommend this book. I rated it 5 stars. It's got so many memorable moments. I've tabbed it up so much. There's so many just good concepts. And the interesting thing is that Dana's in an interracial relationship with a white man, and at one point in the book, he also gets called to the past. Some of the conversations that they have as a result of their differing perspectives on the time period is so powerful. We've been hearing a lot this summer about the concept of defunding the police and police corruption, police brutality. There are passages within this book that discuss those same topics. So I just feel like if you are new to this conversation, welcome. But recognize the things you are thinking have already been discussed, and read some books, man. Do some research. Don't just go based off what you see on Twitter and Instagram. Read for yourself and form your own opinions. So I want to share out one of these quotes that I underlined because I just thought it was so timely for the summer that we're in right now. What's a patroller? All I could think of was the highway patrol. I thought back to my reading. A patroller was a white man, usually young, often poor, sometimes drunk. He was a member of a group of such men organized to keep blacks in line. What? Patrollers made sure the slaves were where they were supposed to be at night, and they punished those who weren't. And for those of you who might not know, these patrollers essentially created the foundation for what we know now as our police departments across the country. The history of the police in the United States is very different as a result compared to other countries. And I think that's also why you see the violence that's perpetrated by the police towards citizens in the United States is so different compared to other countries who just don't have, you know, there is power imbalance. I don't want to downplay that, but it's just not at the same level that the United States experiences. So highly recommend this book. Octavia E. Butler, godmother of Afrofuturism, Afro sci-fi, Afro fantasy, and just may she rest in power and peace forever. So that's it for me today. This is a very short video because I did not read that many books. Couple things I want to highlight though before you go. I wrote a picture book, Carlito the Bat. So if you are interested in purchasing it, the link for purchase is down below. I also signed up to be a poll worker here in Florida. So I think you guys should do it too if you're still able to. I have some information on how to do that in the links down below. Y'all, we need people to be in those polling stations. If you are physically capable, able-bodied, and you have a healthy immune system, please consider doing this. It is such an important part of protecting our democracy and making sure that people's votes are taken care of and making sure that people are extended their rights to vote. So please join the fight. If you can't, you know, make sure you're doing what you can to contribute to political candidates within your community. Remember, the presidency is not the only seat that's available for office right now. You probably have a lot of local elections happening as well that are equally important. if not more important, because the local elections and state elections are the ones who actually decide how these federal decisions are carried out on a case-by-case basis. So that's my piece. I love this month. It's October. Halloween is afoot, and shout out to my Halloween themed nails. All right. If you like what you see, hit like and subscribe. I post videos every Wednesday and Sunday, sometimes Friday. Oh, and before we go, I want you in the comments to leave an emoji of your favorite Halloween traditional monster, creature, costume, what have you. All right, ciao y'all.